Welcome to my top 10 favorite video games of all time. The general rules for my particular list is some people will do only one game per developer or one game per franchise or whatever it may be. But given that I'm mainly a Gran Turismo channel, it's not realistic for me to do that because, spoiler alert, there's multiple Gran Turismos on this list. So I figured, not just for Gran Turismo to make it fair, I'll just put whatever games I truly think are in my top 10 favorite of all time. Meaning, yeah, some of them are going to be multiples of a series or developer, whatever it may be. And also other just general information is I'm going to try to make this more about the games themselves than the competitive aspects of the games. Recently, I've been way more competitive in games than I was when I was a kid. So therefore, at times, I had way more fun than in other games in the competitive aspect because of just doing bigger things than I could accomplish as a kid. But I'm going to grade this more upon the overall experience of the game itself and not just grading it on if I happen to be good at the game or not. Because ultimately this is more looking at the games than myself. This is just the games that myself happens to like. And another minor side note too is the background I'm using when talking about each individual game is the screenshots I found via Googling the game. So generally it's going to be like box art and stuff, which obviously a box doesn't really fit well on a phone screen, so it's not always going to be exactly perfect in terms of getting it to fit well within the phone screen, but it's a lot easier than that than trying to find gameplay footage, because a lot of the time gameplay footage of games that aren't on PS4, so therefore my own gameplay footage saved via Sayer function is copyrighted, and I just don't want to get in all that, so it's just an image. But anyway, let's get into it. And to begin with, as mentioned, I'll get to honorable or not later, but the first mention, and probably the most obvious given the current times, is Gran Turismo Sport. Again, competitive aspect, this is definitely in my top 10 like moments in gaming type thing, but well, there is times where I get very much a lot of enjoyment out of the game. All the games on the list, to an extent, I generally just don't have times where I dread playing the game. At times that happens with GT Sport, so just overall, I don't think it would realistically make the list, especially, let's say, 20 years from now looking back at this game. I just really don't think it'd make it. I mean, obviously, 20 years from now, there'd be more games on the list, and some would be off, and blah, blah, blah. Because who knows what's going to happen in the future, but still, I don't think either now or in the future, GT Sport would make my top 10 list for my favorite games of all time. So, I mean, take that as you may and whatever, but I mean, even the general ratings agree with that, honestly. Gran Turismo Sport is the lowest rated Gran Turismo game, so whatever. Moving on. Next, which is sort of a criterion grading too, is how well do I actually remember the game to give it a fair score. And the first one I'll mention on this list is Need for Speed Underground 2. Because I don't know this for a fact, but I think it came out in 2003, maybe? So therefore I would have been roughly 5 years old when this came out. And I do have vague memories of the game. I remember I started out with a Nissan 240SX, and then ultimately moved on, like progressing through the game, to Mazda RX-8, and I remember particularly drifting the Pontiac GTO, which in hindsight, that was actually quite impressive because I remember that was my favorite drift car. And then I figured out later on that during that time when Pontiac still existed, Pontiacs in general were winning a lot of the drift type championships in real lives. So it seems like, at least from what I could tell, Need for Speed actually modeled that realistically, but that's a side note. In general, I just don't remember enough of this game to truly put it in the top 10 or not, because I remember pretty much only fond memories of this game. Just my memory of this game is kind of hazy. I do remember generalities, but not enough specific for me to truly grade it. Another thing too, and I'm not even a total picture of this game, is Gran Turismo 3 is sort of the same situation here. Even less so, but I would say if I could remember my entire life in full, I wouldn't want to, but I'd just say I could. I'd probably have GT3 on this list, but I just simply can't. It came out in 2001, so it would have been roughly 3 years old. I just simply don't remember it during its time. Meaning, yes, I remember playing GT3, but I remember playing it more recently. So, okay, I'd be judging it after GT4 came out is really when I truly start remembering the details of GT3. So that's not a fair comparison either. And now on to another game I was showing a picture for is, this may not even be one y'all recognize, Speed Devils. This was a Sega Dreamcast game that I think also went on PC of a different name. I don't know what that is, but I think that's a truism, right, Hunter? Speed Devils is this kind of what you think of when you think of a 90s arcade racer. It's just fun, it's not the best physics in the world, it's not the best graphics in the world, but I think this was actually the first, maybe even just game in general, but first racing game that I played. And it seems like this is the first game that I have somewhat of a memory of. The one sole memory I have of this game is it seems like I remember driving something that kind of looked like a Jeep around a track that had a tornado in it. Lo and behold, I did research later and found out that yes, that's a thing that exists. This game has a track with a tornado in it, and one of the cars in it looks like a Jeep. This doesn't have licensed cars, but that was true. That's why I put it in the top 10, because I just have one memory before. But the reason I am mentioning it, and this is a definite honorable mention, is because I guess this game was my first memory of playing video games. From what I can recall it was. This game came out in 1998, so I guess I'm remembering playing it when I was like 2 or 3 years old, just extremely vaguely. Again, like GT3, this was also a game that came back to play later and didn't remember stuff from it from playing it again, and also liked it when I replayed it. But the reason I put this on the honorable mentions instead of Gran Turismo 3 is because Gran Turismo 3 was one of my earliest memories. I'm pretty sure this chronologically was my earliest memory because it came out 3 years earlier. So, now moving on to the actual top 10. In 10th place is NASCAR 08. The general ratings for this game were fairly low, between like a 5 to 7 out of 10, depending on what it was. This game also later came out on PS3, but I had the PS2 version, the one in the picture. And the reason I decided to get this game was because I didn't get a PS3 for another year. NASCAR games back then did the EA style, they really came out a year before the date on the cover. Nowadays they don't really do that, but back then they did, and I think this was the last PS2 game I got, and well, I liked it because the previous game that I had was NASCAR 2003 season, meaning not the one made by EA, but it is that NASCAR game, like the most famous one, the one that y'all probably seen videos of mods and all that. And I did have the PC version. I mentioned that in other videos. I might try to find that. Maybe, just maybe do modding on that. I don't know. We'll see. But the reason that I put 08 on the list instead of 03 is because since I just don't really remember 03, I think essentially that was just my dad's game that I played somewhat. And I don't even think he played it tons. Because back then there wasn't really mods for it. So ultimately, I didn't have NASCAR 06 or 07. And the reason that NASCAR 08 lower ratings was because essentially it was the same game just with a new roster from NASCAR 06 and 07. So essentially I was playing NASCAR 06 by playing NASCAR 08, and a lot of people like NASCAR 06. But this was my first experience in NASCAR 8, so yes, I enjoyed the game, but that's also why it's not higher on the list, just because I understand that I would have had the same experiences earlier in life with NASCAR 06 or something. But still, nonetheless, I had fun, and going back to play the game more recently, it's still fun, but I also just understand more in that the game was also old tech at that point. It just was the same thing rehashed with the new cars for that season, so Fun game, but definitely not a new game, so therefore it's in 10th. Next on the line is Burnout 3. This is sort of on the opposite spectrum. This game is probably better overall with ratings, and I have it on the list. But the reason that this game is actually lower on the list for me is this game came out early in the time of me remembering playing it too. But where, say, something like GT3, there was a game coming out after it. From what I recall, Burnout 3 was the last game until Revenge, which came out like 2006. This game came out in roughly like 2003 or so. So aka it had quite a gap before the next game came out. And I didn't even actually get the next game. I didn't get one till Paradise. And therefore I continued to play this game even when it was old tech. I think my family got it when it was new. My dad also played it as well. Not too long after that, he started moving towards playing PC games. So a lot of the games like this sort of I inherited, but nonetheless, I very much enjoyed this game. But again, it's not higher on the list just because it's... When I go back to play it now, it's just... It's fun, but it's definitely not the best of like the Burnout series or anything. I've never had Revenge, just from what I can tell, that's just an overall better game. When this game came out, it was incredible. Just now it's been outseated. Granted, something like Gran Turismo 3 had the same thing, but the reason it was an honorable mentions instead of this is just because it came out that much earlier. So I just have more memories of this game, but still an overall great game. Just it kind of got replaced through the years. Still though, it is my 9th favorite game of all time. Now to 8. MX vs. A2 Unleashed. This game had the exact same thing as Burnout 3 in theory. There has been a lot, and I mean a lot, of MX vs. ATV games since this one. But playing this one back and then looking at clips of others, it had the NASCAR 08 standard of the new games are kind of rehashes of this game, but I do literally mean the new games. From what I can tell, except for obviously a quite big graphical improvement, even the newest MX vs. ATV, which came out in 2017, is essentially still this game. So therefore this game gets higher on the list because yes, technically speaking, the games have improved since then, but the actual gameplay is still kind of the same. And the gameplay started out as wonderful. Essentially, MX vs. ATV Unleashed is a combination of MX, Supercross, and ATV games into one, but it also had monster trucks, and it had planes, and it had dune buggies, and it had sand rails, which to this day I still think those are the same thing. Dune buggies and sand rails. I don't get the difference between them, but that's not important. And they had trophy trucks, and they had helicopters, and essentially this was the Crew 2 15 years earlier. It had the brand vehicles, it had the off-road stuff. It didn't have boats, but it had some other stuff to replace it too. Like golf carts. Yeah, this game also had golf carts. So essentially it was just the Crew 2 but early, and the Crew or the Crew 2 doesn't make my top 10 all time. But one of the reasons it doesn't is because, well, I just played this first, and honestly, I had more fun with this than I had with the Crew 2, just because this was my first experience with all the types of crazy vehicles. And even playing it back now, it's still a fun game, and it still holds up, and quite good all around, but it's also not higher on the list, just because it doesn't really specialize into one thing. It's good all around, but it doesn't really have any downright great points, but still overall definitely worthy of the top 10. Moving on now is Need for Speed Carbon. Yeah, I know kind of in general, especially even when I've said it before, Need for Speed Underground 2 is just overall better game than Need for Speed Carbon. When this game came out, a lot of people were saying this was more of already EA doing the rehash thing. But I didn't get Need for Speed Most Wanted, And looking back in hindsight, yeah, this game was kind of like Need for Speed Most Wanted, but I didn't get it. And I can see that this was sort of the last of the golden era of Need for Speed. Yeah, it was kind of a rehash, but it was a rehash of an incredible game that I didn't play, but still, I have plenty of fond memories. I truly do remember Need for Speed Carbon. Ultimately, I think I completely finished the game over a decade. AKA, I just got better at it when I was older. But even early on, I remember doing a non-associative career mode mission in which you could drive a dump truck. In general, that doesn't sound that fun. But the dump truck went like 170 miles an hour when you were full on a nitro. And it was against cops, and you could just wreck the cops quite easily, and it was just quite a crazy experience. If y'all remember from Need for Speed Carbon 2, they had all the miscellaneous things alongside the road that you could hit to slow down the cops, and it did absolutely nothing to your own car when you hit them. So you could go straight through a gas station, and it doesn't hurt your car whatsoever. It's not realistic, but it's really kind of fun when you blow up half of the 20 cops chasing you, and then the other half you just ram off the road later on in your 170 mile an hour dump truck. And yeah, essentially just Need for Speed Carbon was a lot of fun, not realistic in the slightest, and it kind of was a rehash, but it was the last good Need for Speed game, and definitely worthy of a top 10, but not quite top 5. Next one on the list, and not quite in the top 5, it is 6th, is Drive Club. Drive Club didn't have the best ratings coming out, but ultimately a lot of people, including myself, have said the game has improved since launch. I didn't even get this game at launch, and I don't necessarily regret it. The only part that I do regret not getting at launch is the competitive aspect, which again I mentioned before. That's why it's hard for me to truly grade this game, because essentially the reason that I play Drive Club now is purely the competitive aspect. Over the years, I've just happened to get really good at this game. This is probably my second best overall game that still is online to GT Sport. So, I've really have had fun playing this game, and not too many negatives playing the game. So therefore, that's good criteria to make the list. There's been no times where I've necessarily been not enjoying playing the game, but I've also had times with really and true enjoyment, but also a lot of that enjoyment has came from the competitive aspect, so it's kind of hard for me to truly judge this one, but I think 6th place is fair out of the top 10. Again, if I was including the competitive aspect, this would probably be top 3, but the main reason I'm not doing this is because a lot of the games I just played when I was a kid, and I just wasn't all that competitive back then. I just wasn't good enough to be. So I don't want to be unfair to my younger self, essentially doing that. So I grade the games as the game and not my competitive aspect. Just happen to be good at it. So Drive Club is 6. It's kind of hard to even explain the game tons without saying a competitive aspect. I mean, the graphics are incredible. They might even be better than GT Sport. The physics are simcade to the point of which the cars feel different, but then it can also be drifted and crazy stuff too. And ultimately, just the atmosphere of the game is nice. It kind of reminds me of old Gran Turismo games with like the good background music and stuff. More games need their own specific background music. When it's done well, it's quite better than musicians like the ones that actually you hear on radio and stuff. So anyway, now to the top 5. With 5th being NBA 2K11 and NBA 2K12. Yeah, I'll be honest, this is kind of sort of a cop-out, I ain't gonna lie. But all in all, the main reason I'm doing this is because they're kind of the same game. Granted, there's kind of going to be coming up, and y'all can probably guess what I'm going to mention. Or maybe not, actually, there's kind of 2 games there, but if y'all have been around my channel for a long time, y'all might be able to guess what it is because of opinions of a specific game and all that. But anyway, this, and the reason I include them both as fifth is because NBA 2K11 was the very beginning of the online style play, in which my player was a thing. In fact, I think that technically started in 2K10, but it kind of people didn't really like it that much in 10. It was made playable to a point of generally enjoyable in 2K11, and I did that a whole heck of a heap. I quite enjoyed it, and I don't regret it. In general, the My Player didn't make me angry like it does now. And back then, they still cared about offline, to the point of it wasn't a rehash every single year. In fact, 2K11 got an entirely new mode. As well as improvements to online, they improved the offline quite a bit, because they added the Michael Jordan Challenge. Being a UK fan of college, I just don't like Michael Jordan that much as a person because he picked North Carolina over University of Kentucky, but I have to respect his basketball talent, and it was really fun playing the recreations of his most famous game. That was NBA 2K11's selling point, and it was quite an amazing selling point. Plus, also, it seemed like the final game till 19, in which I was also pretty good online. After this, they made a shot meter. This was pretty much the final game that didn't have a shot meter, and you actually had to time it by looking at the shot instead of looking at the meter. And that just benefited me quite a bit because I attempt to play basketball games realistic, and I even did back then. So onwards a bit to 2K12. 2K12, yeah, it kind of was a rehash of 11. And overall, the online multiplayer didn't improve that much, but they made the Jordan Challenge the Everybody Challenge. Meaning, you could take any NBA player, and if you knew how of any era, in general, as players that played now, or play currently in 2012. But anyway, if you knew how, via stuff that I can't remember even the exact order anymore, but I don't have saves of like Larry Bird and Magic Johnson and stuff. You could play any player from any era in the modern day on any team you wanted and just play out their careers at any point. Like, you could pick between 19-year-old Michael Jordan, or you could pick between 36-year-old Michael Jordan, like the one from the 98 Bulls. You could play out their career on any team you wanted from the current time. Or, again, if you knew how, you could load rosters of any time period. That was a lot harder to do back then than now loading an entire... all the team's rosters, but it could be done. It just took longer. Because back then, they allowed you to make an individual team instead of an individual total roster of all the teams. It would be nice if you could just make an entire, all of the rosters, one particular team, and or one particular player. Just have an option to do all. That's never been an option. So anyway, 2K12 was more of a rehash of 2K11. That's why I don't put them in particular spots. But it was just so much of an improvement, I put both games as fifth. So anyway, fourth place is Gran Turismo 5. And all in all, I think Gran Turismo 5 was probably my most emotionally attached game. I'll put it like that. I guess I'll go ahead and go into specifics for this video, but make it its own. In fact, I'll probably just will do its own video. But in general, there's quite a big event that happened the day that Gran Turismo 5 came out for me that made it pretty emotional. And I remembered every bit of this game, like from when it came out to when the online ended. And this was the first game I have a full, complete memory of, I think is the best way to say. Gran Turismo 4, yeah, I remember in general starting playing it, and I definitely remember like 2006-07 era. Like right before I got a PS3, and GT4 is one of the very few games I played when I had the PS3 still pretty consistently, but for GT5, I'd still be playing it today if it had online and not regretting it in the slightest. Because GT5, I think arguably, was probably the most complete Gran Turismo game. this would be the game I'd recommend someone to start the series out. It didn't have as many cars as GT6 and didn't have as good graphics or physics as GT Sport, but ultimately I feel like this game more than any other embodies Gran Turismo as a franchise. Because it had so many new modes, especially back in the online era when it had self-racing, and this was the implementation of GT Academy into the game itself and not just their own demos and stuff. And, I mean, probably if you're watching this video, y'all most likely know Gran Turismo 5. It's just an all-around incredible game with really no downsides. The very beginning, when the game released, the online was kind of sort of buggy. But I didn't play much online of that to about mid-December. To an extent, I kind of was waiting for the bugs to be fixed, but more than anything, I was just incredibly enjoying the offline bit of the game. This is why I recommend GT5 more than any, because this game, PD was still fully focused on offline, making it better and stuff. But still had the online feature there, and quite well too. So this was just perfect balance of Gran Turismo. Granted, the online is done now, but still, this would definitely be the game I'd recommend if you're starting in a Gran Turismo series. Well, no, I'd still recommend all of them to an extent, but probably start here. So anyway, to my third favorite game of all time, Skate 2. Y'all may very well be expecting Skate 3, and this was what I was talking about involving the different games in the series. Y'all may have thought Gran Turismo 6 on the surface, but if y'all been around for a while, as y'all know, my opinions of GT6 are favorable just compared to GT Sport, but for the entire Gran Turismo series, GT6 was somewhat underwhelming. Skate 2, on the other hand, was, for all of the skateboarding games that came out, I'm not saying one could come out later and not be better, because I think eventually there will be a better skateboarding game out there. But all things considered, for the time it came out, I think Skate 2 was the perfect skateboarding game. If you really wanted it to, it could be realistic. But Skate 2 had the same crazy glitches as Skate 3. The Skate 3 caught on better because it had, you could drop props. That was essentially really the only difference, all things considered. In Skate 2 and Skate 3, other than Skate 3, had a bit of a different hollow meat system in which you could jump around and stuff after the ending. Sort of a way to compare it is how, like, Burnout 3 had the crash timer thing. Like, after you crashed, you could still control your car. After you started Hollow Meat, you could still control your person in Skate 3. That was essentially the major difference between Skate 2 and Skate 3. But essentially what I'm saying is Skate 3 was kind of a rehash. Skate 3 was still an incredible game, but the reason I actually keep it out of the top 10 is just because general favorability. Again, I probably had more overall exciting moments with Skate 3 than Skate 2 just in total, because, well, the game lasted for so much longer in popularity because of YouTube. Same with GT Sport compared to, like, GT5. But Skate 3 adds points in which I was downright annoyed with, too, just because of EA became EA right around the point Skate 3 was made. At this point, EA was sort of kind of in their old guard of not doing the crazy microtransactions and stuff. The only microtransaction I bought for Skate 2 was actually a downright new feature that, for a fact, just did not exist when the game came out. I bought the Fantasy Factory DLC. That so did not exist till about 6 months into the Skate 2 run. If y'all aren't familiar with Fantasy Factory, that's the one with Rob Deerjack, the skateboarder who's actually nothing special, but he just caught on and is still actually around. I think that ridiculousness clip's still on TV somehow. I haven't watched that in like 5 years because there's internet now. There's internet then, but still. Nonetheless, Fantasy Factory was cool, and I bought that DLC, and I don't mind it whatsoever because that was a truly new thing that was really well done, and that explains Skate 2 in general. It was a truly new way of doing Skate. It had the flip trick system, which Skate 1 had as well, but there was also something completely new being Hollow Meat. I just downright fell in love with the Hollow Meat aspect of Skate 3 or Skate 2, and just, that was the best one. Skate 3 had a different version of Hollow Meat, but I wouldn't really say it was better. It Again, that will kind of come up later to an extent too. In my final thoughts when all the games are through. But ultimately, I think the Skate 2... I can't really skateboard in real life. I mean, I can kind of sort of balance on skateboard, but I can't do tricks or anything. I can't really go. Can't really push it. But it's kind of the same as race cars. I mean, I can drive a car, not well and nothing special, but I can do it. I definitely would never be on a racetrack in real life. This allows me to do crazy stuff I could never do in real life, or, if I want to, be realistic. Essentially, Skate 2 is kind of Gran Turismo. It can be realistic if you wanted it to, but you can do a lot of crazy fun stuff if you don't. Skate 2 is the perfect skateboarding game to me, and it sort of epitomized video games as a whole. I like the realistic part and will sometimes do it, and this does that well. Better than any other skateboarding game, especially at the time. And it can also be downright crazy. Now, on to my second favorite video game of all time. Grand Theft Auto 5. Y'all know GTA 5, so I ain't gonna be on this game for all that long. But essentially, in my opinion, it's just the perfect video game overall. Granted, I'm a racing video game fan, so that's why it ain't number one. Probably, all things considered, y'all can guess correctly my number one game at this point, but let's still get to that. This GTA is 5 in general, probably all of them really, but this was the one I started with, but in general, is the perfect game. I even personally like its online section, really. GTA 5 Online, yeah, it's microtransactions, hunger and stuff. People say it's pay to win, but realistically it's not. You can make your own race, and they provide you with a lot of the things. Say they had new cars, they will actually provide you with the stock versions of new cars. And then you can make your own race, and enjoy the stock versions of the new things they added. Having the stock version of something is better than nothing at all, so I actually still quite like the GTA Online aspect of it, because it's still plenty popular enough where you can do your own individual things, and have people ultimately do it with you. GTA 5 is popular enough to make that work. But then there's it's offline. Y'all know it's offline. That's where the game started, and it's just downright incredible. I'm not going to go into it that much, but it's just... I'll say this. It's the only story mode where I didn't want to skip the cutscenes. It was downright entertaining watching the cutscenes and playing the game, and it was very much a variety of gameplay enough to where it was just... Overall, GTA 5 is just, in my opinion, the perfect video game, and I think that's actually quite a widely accepted opinion. Also, I started it in PS3, and I ultimately got it with a bundle for PS4. I don't regret it, both copies are amazing. And anyway, on to number 1. Can y'all guess it? 4. In my opinion, this is the perfect racing game of all time. Again, I said it's probably best to start with GT5 just because it had more modes and better graphics because it was on the HD PS3. Technically speaking though, Gran Turismo 4 was an HD video game. At the time, I was playing it on the TV that actually featured videos, so that was from 1980 something. Obviously it wasn't HD, but still. I even remember beginning playing the game and all that, and just GT4 was probably all in all the game that I played most in the Gran Turismo franchise. I played it so much I killed a PlayStation 2, and I've killed a copy of GT4 from playing it, and onto the Sega PS2, it's not in the best of conditions. Granted, that's kind of to be expected, just given that its age. I got my second PS2 in about 2009, so it's 10 years old now. It runs, but not well. And I got the second version of GT4 in about 2011. Ultimately, I would say I've done about 150,000 miles on GT4. GT5 and 6 have both had about 110-ish thousand, and GT Sport, at this rate, I'll end up with maybe 70, 80,000, something like that. But This GT4, it had a crazy amount of cars compared to GT3. I think it had maybe 5.5 times the amount of cars in it. It had a lot more tracks, and even the physics, in my opinion, were quite good too. People say the car is understeered and all that, but GT4 is a game where I learned rudimentary tuning aspects. To this day, that video that I saw on my channel, I couldn't beat my own top speed run from 2007. I used all the tricks I learned from modern Gran Turismo games and Mega Days that simply don't work for the old Gran Turismo games, but I couldn't beat the top speed run in the 99 Dodge Viper, which I think, of all things considered, for a GT4 probably put 20,000 or so miles on. GT4 was just straight up incredible. I could make the cars run the exact way I wanted them to, with even rudimentary tuning. Yeah, I probably stocked, they might have understeered, but I don't remember that in general. And it was the first game with a Dodge Ram in it that I played, which ended up being incredible in multiple ways. And this, yeah, I mean, I'll admit, a lot of GT4 probably rating it literally as my downright favorite game is nostalgia. But going back and playing it today, it's still an incredible game. All in all, the physics aren't that much worse than the modern games. The car list is better than the modern game, meaning GT Sport. Same with the track list. I'd say same with the soundtrack. The background music is downright amazing. Second to none, in my opinion. The best background music in any video game, like ever. Gran Turismo 4. The presentation is incredibly on point. In arcade mode, they have like the backgrounds of all the stuff that's like moving and all that. And this, honestly, GT4 was, I would even say, 2 console generations ahead of its time. It had online, it didn't really work, but it sort of kind of had it. It was HD, and it even sort of had a social tracker thing. It had the journal feature, which I didn't use all that much, but in hindsight was actually quite incredible, because essentially it tracked your progress sort of like modern social media does. Gran Turismo 4 kind of sort of predicted the future. If only PD could have predicted that going the route of Gran Turismo 4 would have been better for the future of Gran Turismo in general, instead of going the full-on GT Sport route. But nonetheless, PD ain't what it used to be, but what it used to be is downright making the best racing game ever. And me enjoying racing games more than any other genre, GT4 is just downright my favorite game ever. So in final thoughts, this is my top 10 list. There's games like Burnout Paradise or Need for Speed Shift or something that I very much enjoyed when I was younger. But all in all, I consider her worse compared to other games of that series. Granted, again, I said I'd include multiple games of the series, but ultimately I leave Burnout Paradise off just because, yeah, I played it tons and I really very much enjoyed that game. But ultimately, that was the start of EA being EA and tons of microtransactions, and ultimately that didn't happen in Burnout Paradise Remastered. That's why I said EA is not as evil now as they used to be, like 5 years ago, but still, it wouldn't really be fair to put Burnout Paradise Remastered in the top 10 just because that ain't really the true game, and that's, technically speaking, maybe Burnout Paradise Remastered probably is in my top 10 favorite games, because it's the best version of the old game with all of the microtransactions out of it, which is why I put it out of the top 10. So technically speaking, it probably should be in the top 10, but when I bought Burnout Paradise Remastered, I knew exactly what to expect. When I bought Burnout Paradise Original Game, where I did a video on it, it was a snow day, and I remember every detail of the game that I bought in 2008, more than half of my life ago, and it was just, I didn't know what to expect, and it was quite incredible and a wonderful experience that definitely even worth coming back to even today. And so yeah, Burnout Paradise was good, but it was the beginning of EA being sort of how we know them today. Kind of the same to Need for Speed Shift, and there's some other games on there too that y'all maybe wonder why I'm leaving off. And if y'all wonder any game in particular, just leave it in the comments and I'll discuss it there. But ultimately, I feel confident in the overall top 10. And also the thing I said at the beginning that I kind of end with is World Feature. A game that I feel like I've never played before, but I do believe will end up in my top 10 video games of all time is Wreckfest. It just looks like the prototypical game that I would really enjoy. I don't know where it would end up in top 10 where I never played it, but I have a hunch it will get there. And that's good for the future. The future definitely bright. But a lot of the games on this list, I had no idea what to expect when I got them. I mean, something like NASCAR or NBA, yeah, kind of just general, but those were kind of few on the list overall. So, right there you have it, folks. I kind of have a general sense of the future, what to expect, and can expect some quite good things. But in the future, I'm sure there'll be something that I never expected now, or in the future, even until when it happens, that will ultimately make the top 10 list. But for now, I feel confident in this list. I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and I hope y'all in general enjoy your top 10 favorite games forever too, and are willing to update the list when games come as well. Now, sales is important and all that, but I understand that new games can be made to be better despite how good an old game was. So always keep your thoughts open and understand that all of this is also just opinions too, and enjoy what you've always enjoyed and don't regret it. This is what I've enjoyed in order from 10th to 1st, and all things considered is most definitely worth a yeehaw.